Ever since the internet first went mainstream, the one thing that has really taken over the internet is social media. And while we can praise social media as being one of the defining features of the 21st century, there's still a lot of bad associated with it. Now I know you've heard it 1,000 times, social media is bad for you, you should cut it all out of your life. A question that comes to mind is, which social media is the most toxic? Now before we get into this, we should really define what a social media platform is and what toxic actually means. As you'll find out, I'm going to be using the term social media platform a bit loosely, and basically just saying any website or app that is used solely for communicating with other people in sort of a public way. So I'm not including like messenger apps or anything like that. And as far as defining toxicity, I would say pretty much anything that brings out the worst in people. You know, whether it's making people really angry or fighting with each other, or doing stupid stuff for attention, you know, all the things that really make social media suck. And now to kick off this list with the least toxic social media platform, and that is Google+. Because in order for a website to be considered toxic, it actually needs people using it. And now moving on to the top 10 most toxic social media platforms. Number 10, YouTube. Now I know it might seem a little biased that I'm on YouTube, I spend all my time on YouTube, saying that it's the least toxic platform. YouTube is kind of a weird one though, because you have the YouTube creators, and then you have the YouTube comments. Now the YouTube comments on their own would probably be in the top 3 most toxic, but overall YouTube as a platform is kind of low on the list, mainly because the people who are creating content really have to put themselves out there, you know, they typically have to show their face, or at least put their voice out there, and a lot of the times, not all the time, people are putting a lot of research into their videos and trying to make them decent. But when you're really only talking about creators interacting with other creators, I mean, sure you'll have drama here and there, but there's not a ton of hostility unless there's somebody who just really deserves it. Number 9, TikTok and Vine. Now I've decided to throw these ones together because they're very similar platforms, and everything I would have to say about one is pretty much true for both. And yeah, I know I'm not saying that there's quality content on there, I'm just saying it's not toxic. I mean, if this was a top 10 cringe list, then yeah, sure, it'd probably be number 1. But from what I gather, TikTok just seems to be a lot of teenagers that are trying to out-funny each other and just kind of looking for attention. I was originally going to put this as less toxic than YouTube, but then I realized that it's kind of a hub for clout chasing, and that's kind of a big hit against it. Number 8, MySpace. Now, I'm not making the same joke as the Google Plus here, I'm talking about MySpace of 2006. So the thing is about MySpace, as it was around before smartphones were a thing. And you have to realize that there's a ton of people out there who probably never even used the internet on a computer, and they probably didn't even know the internet existed until they had an iPhone. And so MySpace was way ahead of its time in a lot of ways. Now this was long before internet culture had really been established. Like today, we have like over 90% of Americans using the internet regularly. And so it's just a normal thing that just about everybody's online all the time, and it's usually easy to get a hold of people in one way or another. But back in around 2006 when MySpace was around, people were a little bit unsure of how to really respond. I mean, you gotta remember, this was during the time where people were saying, oh no, never show your face, never post your name anywhere on the internet, there's bad people who will hunt you down. And so it was a little bit more anonymous than modern day Facebook, but it was a lot of people's first experience with having an online social life. Now of course this is a video of me pointing out toxicity in all the platforms, so we can't say that there was no toxicity back then, but a lot of the toxicity that came from MySpace all came from one specific feature, and that is the top 8 friends. Now for those who never used MySpace, you had your list of friends just like on Facebook, but you could kind of like sort them around and have your top 8 show up on your main page. And so there was a lot of drama that came up between friends, like, oh, you're number 1 on my page, but I'm number 4 on your page. And yeah, that's when we learned it's not so safe to publicly announce which friends you like more than others. Now, MySpace was sort of like a trial run to see how humanity could handle social media. And after that, we should have just said, alright, nope, we can't handle it. It's a bad idea, it brings out the worst in people. But then others figured out just how much money you could make running one of these. Number 7 is Reddit. Now I know a lot of people are thinking, what, Reddit's not a social media? Okay, Reddit is the social media for people who hate social media. That's all it is. Now, what kind of toxicity does Reddit have? Well, Reddit is what happens when you have tens of millions of people that think that their tens of millions of people is a secret club. And because of the upvote system, it really is just one big popularity contest. What makes Reddit really toxic is that if you have an unpopular opinion, then you just get drowned out. If you don't agree with the hive mind, we are just going to shut you out, we don't want to hear anything you have to say. And what's really ironic is that they have a subreddit called Unpopular Opinions. where you have a popularity contest of whose unpopular opinion is the most popular, which completely defeats the whole purpose. But now let's move on to number 6, which is 4chan. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could you put a site with the most degenerate people on the internet as number 6 in toxicity? Well, since people already kind of know what makes 4chan toxic, let me just give it a little bit of a defense. Now, I think 4chan is for that little part inside of all of us that just hates something, but don't want to hurt your reputation by announcing that to your friends. So the one thing that 4chan really has going for it is that there is no profiles, no names, everyone is anonymous, and this gives people the confidence to just come out and vent and say whatever is on their mind. It's a whole community of people that really just couldn't care less for social norms or political correctness, and they just want to come out and be completely honest and just say whatever's on their mind, especially since we live in such a die-hard politically correct cancel culture, where saying the wrong thing out in public will just get a mob of people trying to attack you. But even with all of that, there are still much more toxic places on the internet. Number 5, Tumblr. Now, if I had done this video in 2016, Tumblr would most likely be number 1, but it does seem like the website has kind of fallen off the earth. You really don't hear about it much anymore. The things that made it toxic 4 years ago still pretty much apply today, but much less so. Now, the main theme that really seems to spring up out of Tumblr culture is just anything that's considered normal is bad, anything that's considered not normal is good. It's all about what can I find to be offended about today? Or a whole lot of no matter what I choose to do with my life, it should be perfectly acceptable to everyone else. And so you just have a whole community of people that go on there to justify all of their bad habits. You'll see a lot of stuff that's like, I'm a trans species, and I'm multiple animals, and also multiple genders, and multiple races, and anyone who's straight, or white, or male, or cisgender, they're all just evil, and they're all out to get me, they're oppressing me. I mean, it almost seems like Tumblr is the hub for the victimhood mentality. So when I was putting this list together, coincidentally, I just happened to notice that all of these different types of platforms sort of lined up in their categories. So like, on the least toxic side, you had a lot of the video creating platforms. And then in the middle, you have sort of the forum type, Reddit, Tumblr, 4chan, where you're kind of just talking with other people in the same fan club or hive mind or whatever. But now that we get into the top 4 most toxic social media sites, you start to notice a lot more mainstream effects. Starting with Facebook. Now, I know a lot of people might think Facebook is the worst place on the internet, and in a lot of ways it really can be. The thing about Facebook, though, is that you mostly only interact with people you know directly. I mean, sure, you'll add a lot of friends of every person you know, every person you've ever talked to, and so you might find yourself getting into fights with people over political opinions, or maybe you're just tired of seeing people's family pictures. But with how easy it is to just unfollow people and only stick to your own friend group, it's not impossible to avoid toxicity. Really, the main place that you might find yourself getting into fights is on public page comment sections. Trust me, I know the feeling when you see some post that went viral that has like hundreds of thousands of likes and then like 50,000 comments, and you're just reading through the comments and you're just like, oh, I really want to reply to this guy, I want to show him how wrong he is. And then you get into these endless internet arguments that really just don't go anywhere and you just waste your time. But I would say that the reason that Facebook isn't quite on top of the toxicity meter is mainly due to you kind of isolating yourself to only seeing what you want to see. Now, moving on to number 3, I'm actually going to show number 3 and number 2 together, and that is Snapchat and Instagram. And I do that because they're very toxic in a lot of the same ways. Now, these are ways that do apply to Facebook as well, but it has been shown that Snapchat and Instagram are the leading cause of depression as far as social media goes. And it's toxic in a much different way than a lot of the other platforms I've mentioned. Because while a lot of the other platforms are people getting into fights and getting into arguments and just, being nasty to each other, the way that Instagram and Snapchat are toxic in their own way is that they really promote people to be as fake as possible. Because it's more so than just being a popularity contest. It's more like, how glamorous can I make my life look to make everyone else jealous? And if I happen to make myself popular by looking like I'm this gorgeous person doing amazing things all the time, then I have to constantly keep making more pictures and posts, just continuing this fake lifestyle for thousands of people on the internet. And what makes people so depressed on this app is that they are sitting at home, looking at their phone, and they're seeing pictures of all these people out doing amazing things, and they're thinking, man, my life sucks. I'm missing out on all these amazing things while these people are out partying and having a lot of fun. Which, on a side note, I understand the whole FOMO mentality, the fear of missing out, where you see pictures of people online that look like they're just having the time of their lives, while you think that your life is so boring. I actually do have a personal trick that I got over that years ago. The best way I found to not really care much. Okay, so are you ever out in like a public place? Maybe you're at a restaurant, maybe you're at a concert. I mean, sure, you're having an alright time, maybe it's kind of fun, you don't mind being there. And then you look over and you see like 3 girls all like squishing together to try and get a great picture of them having the time of their life. And then they take the picture and then they go right back to just standing around on their phones. And you realize just like that picture that they just took makes it look like it's the most amazing thing ever. But then you see the reality of it and it's nothing that special. And so when you can see these pictures being taken from an outsider's perspective, you can realize that a lot of what people are posting on the internet is not as glamorous as it really looks. Well, now it's time to move on to the #1 most toxic social media site on the internet. And I mean, it's kind of obvious at this point, the one I haven't talked about, Twitter. Now, when I mentioned Facebook, I talked a lot about how everyone is isolated to mostly only talking to their own friends. But on Twitter, it's a much more public setting. You know, it's often referred to as like the public square, where anyone can talk to anybody. I mean, it is kind of interesting that we do have a way to reach out and just talk to celebrities. But what it's also done is it's become very easy for anyone to just speak out every thought they've ever had in their life, whether they put a lot of thought into it or not. And so you just have people tweeting left and right every thought they've ever had. Everyone thinks they're an expert at things, and so they have to fight with everyone who disagrees with them. Everyone has to comment on everything. Anytime you see someone that disagrees with you, you have to let them know. And remember when I was talking about MySpace, how that was kind of like the intro to social media? Well, people have become more and more comfortable talking to strangers on the internet. It's kind of like yelling at people while driving down the freeway. I mean, why is it that you'll see a driver cut you off and you can immediately say, "I'm gonna kill you," yet when would you ever say that to, like, somebody's face? And I mean, it's really become the same kind of thing with Twitter, where people are just becoming more and more comfortable to say the most horrible things to people that they've never even met. One other thing that makes Twitter very toxic is that rumors spread like wildfire. You know, with how fast-paced the website is, one bit of misinformation can spread around and turn into more and more misinformation, and suddenly you've got fake news spreading all over the internet, and then by the time you get it corrected, it's far too late. I mean, Twitter just seems to try to be the worst in every possible category. I mean, you do technically have a lot of the same thing with the Instagram where people are posting bits of their life, and you also have the bit of hive mind mentality like Reddit, where people will just block anybody that has a different opinion than them. And then you also have tons of people trying to virtue signal to try and look like the most virtuous person. And then anytime somebody slips up or says something you find unacceptable, then in comes the cancel culture. And it's really become sort of like an internet cult in a way. Because you have all of these regular norms that are socially acceptable that everyone is supposed to be like. But then, if anyone steps out of bounds, then they are to be exiled and we should hate them and cast them out of society. And that is why Twitter is the most toxic social media platform. And if you disagree with me, well then go ahead and prove me wrong. Make the YouTube comment section the most toxic place on the internet. But just sort of as an afterthought, I mostly spoke of all of these social media platforms just like as a general concept. Really, most of these websites are whatever you make of them. It is very possible to use a lot of these platforms with zero toxicity whatsoever, because a lot of it is personalized to whatever you are looking for. Like, I use a lot of Facebook, but at the same time not really, because I've unfollowed almost all of my friends, and I pretty much only use it to like look at meme pages and follow bands and use the Messenger app. So like any bit of toxicity on Facebook, I blocked that out years ago. So when people say how much they hate Facebook, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot all that stuff's even on this website because I never see it. With Twitter, it is a little bit harder though, especially when you've got like the trending tab always in plain view, and it's just always trying to drag you into political fights and stuff. But hey, let's also give out some honorable mentions for this list. Now, there were a few other social media platforms that I thought about adding, but they really just didn't make a whole lot of sense, such as Xbox Live. There is technically a lot of toxicity on there, but it doesn't really fit with the whole social media category. Another one I thought of adding was Twitch. I don't know, I kind of think of Twitch as like YouTube's cousin, and I would say there's not a whole lot of toxicity in the community of Twitch and streamers. But the site is kind of a train wreck because of the way it's managed, and it doesn't treat all of its creators the same, and it applies some rules to some people and not to others. I guess that's true on YouTube too, though. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoy your toxic internet. You know, it's been a long time since I've actually recorded a video. It took me a long time to actually force myself to jump back into it, so hopefully I can make a habit out of it again. This channel's pretty much just gonna be me talking about whatever I feel like talking about, and still trying to incorporate the cat from time to time. With all this talk of social media, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that track me down Just if you really want to, you can follow me, but that about does it for the first video on this channel.